Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game, and also the last one we'll be showing from the Superbet Poland Blitz tournament, Gukesh versus Magnus Carlsen. Their second encounter. This is round 25 if you count all of the games, or if you count only blitzes. This is blitz section, then it's round 16. The last game that Magnus won in his incredible 10-game winning streak. For those of you who haven't seen my previous video, yes, Magnus went on a 10-game winning streak, which is in this competition absolutely incredible. Last year he also did something similar, even a greater one, also spanning over the course of 2 days. But everyone, mentions, including myself in the previous video, that he made 9 wins in a row, but he made more if you count the previous day as well. But yeah, 10 wins in this competition. Only Magnus can do that. And this game against Gukesh, I thought it'd be the fitting one to show, because whenever I show a Wei game, he always creates chaos. He always, takes his opponents into a deep dark forest. And here Magnus did something similar. And that's not something that we expect from Magnus. Usually we expect Magnus to go, all Capablanca on his opponents and just destroy them positionally. But this game, let's see what happened here. We have pawn to e4 by Gukesh, g6. Magnus goes for the modern defense. We have g6, pawn to d4, pawn to d6, and now knight to c3. We have pawn to c6, the so-called the rat defense. We have bishop to e3 and knight to f6, the transposing into the main line of the Pirc defense. Queen to d2, preparing at some point to trade off the dark square bishops. Knight b to d7 and pawn to f3. So pretty standard stuff, much like you would have against, let's say, a dragon Sicilian. And black will attack on the queen side. We have pawn to b5, pawn to h4. Pawn to g4 is a bit more common here, but of course you will play both. Knight to b6, we have bishop to d3 and pawn to h5, now stopping further advancement of the pawn and controlling that g4 square. And here there is a game where knight to h3 was played, but Gukesh goes queenside castles, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So okay, Magnus fianchettos his bishop g7, we have knight to h3, and now the question is, do you capture on h3 or not? If you do, you do give a very strong bishop for a knight. If you don't, the knight is coming to f4, where it will put some nasty pressure on that the g6 pawn and black's king side. But if you do capture, then you open up the g file for the white rook. Magnus decides to capture. Bishop captures on h3. And okay, Gukesh accepts the challenge. He doubles up his pawns on the h file. G captures on h3 and pawn to e6. Magnus just continues developing like nothing is really happening. Pawn to f4, and now pawn to d5. We have pawn to e5 challenging the knight, and why not? You also get this diagonal for your bishop. Knight f to d7, and now rook h to g1, putting pressure on the g6 pawn. And Magnus could play something like knight to c4, and his position is fine. If anything, maybe even preferable. But here we have bishop to f8 by Magnus, and now we reach the position from the thumbnail. Gukesh plays rook captures on g6. And it seems like a pretty terrible blunder for Magnus to miss something like this. Like, why would he do this? But he's not interested in taking the rook. Of course, if you do capture the rook, then it's just game over. Bishop captures once the king moves, f5, and that's it. f6 is a terrible threat. Also bishop g5. I mean, you resign here. So instead, after rook captures on g6, Magnus played knight to c4. And you think that rook captures on g6 is something that Magnus purposely made, but not really, because here he played bishop to f8, spending like a second on the clock, and then he spent a minute to play knight to c4. So he wasn't sure what he's gonna play after Gukesh played this rook captures on g6 move. But okay, he finds knight to c4, and now how do you deal with this? The bishop is attacked, also the queen is attacked, the rook is still attacked. Now the problem is, if you capture on c4, then you no longer have bishop captures on g6 if f captures on g6 happens. But that's exactly the way to go. Gukesh did not play it. Just to give you an example, bishop captures, f captures on g6, you bring the bishop back, and okay, you're down the exchange, but you're going after the black king. For example, knight b6, Magnus will create some room for the king. Bishop captures, king to d7, he will hide the king on the queen side, and okay, it's still it's still very much a game. However, here after knight to c4, the Magnus spent a minute on playing. Gukesh spent over a minute and a half to play queen to g2, which is not the best move in the position. We already said that bishop captures and c4 is the best. He played queen to g2, and now there is one move that completely takes over the game for Magnus. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the winning idea for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on realizing what was the problem in capturing the rook. The problem was that the king had no squares. So what does Magnus do? Magnus creates squares for his king and plays knight captures on e5. Now, I'm just going to briefly show you, as this is a blitz game, so I'm not going to overanalyze anything, but I would just like to show you what happens if you capture with the other knight. Or even better, what happens if you capture the bishop on e3, because Gukesh also allows knight captures on e3, and that's important why he did that. Now, the reason why he did it is because he wanted to play rook captures on e6. With check, f captures on e6, and now bishop to g7, 6 with check. And now after king to e7, queen to g5 with check. Okay, you have to give back a piece, knight to f6, and now queen captures on f6. King d7, you pick up the rook on h8, black picks up the rook on d1, king captures and queen captures on h4. And now the only way to continue the game without losing on the spot is knight e2, queen captures on h3, queen to h7, check, bishop to e7, and now f5, going after the black king, but there is queen to f1 check, king to d2, e captures on f5, bishop captures, king to d8, and now look at this, queen to h8 with check, king to c7, you take the rook on a8, and now bishop to g5 with check, king to c3, and queen captures on f5, and you get this position where it's equal material. Okay, you will also lose the a7 pawn, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be a draw by repetition, probably queen 8, queen a7, queen 8, queen a7. So incredibly complicated position, and this is what Gukesh had in mind. Okay, he's going to play queen g2, he's going to give up the bishop, he's going to play rook captures on e6, and whatever happens, happens. But Magnus does not fall for it. He played knight d captures on e5, and now the problem is what we've discussed. Now you can't really play f captures on e5, because then knight captures on e3, and you don't have the exact same idea, because after rook captures, f captures, and this bishop to g6 move, the king can now escape to d7. There's no knight on d7, so you don't have any of the tricks that we've discussed, and you're just dead lost here. So instead, after this knight d captures on e5 move, Gukesh plays the only move he has, and that is rook back to g3, save the rook and defend the bishop on e3. But now Magnus just eliminates the bishop pair off the board. Knight captures on d3 comes with check, c captures, knight captures on e3, rook captures on e3, and queen captures on h4. And now this is the position where okay, it's still very interesting, but Magnus will castle queenside, and it will be a bit more difficult for Gukesh to attack Magnus's king than it will be for Magnus to attack Gukesh's king. So rook to f1, and now bishop to d6. f5, well, it does look like a very nice idea, falls to bishop to f4, so you have to move the king first. King to b1 first by Gukesh, and now queenside castles by Magnus. We have queen back to c2, now trying to bust open the position on the queen side, king to b7. We have knight to e2, defending the f4 pawn, also preparing to bring the queen into the game. Maybe you shift the rook over to c1, rook h to g8. We have pawn to f5, but just e captures on f5 by Magnus. Rook e to f3, now trying to recollect. Rook to d7. We have pawn to a4 and pawn to a6, just keeping everything solid. Rook captures on f5, queen captures on h3, and rook captures on f7. We have rook to c8, preparing to defend if needed, knight to c1, and now just rook captures on f7 check, rook captures, and rook to c7 defending. We have rook to f6, goes after the bishop, and also if the bishop moves, there will be some pressure on that c6 pawn, but okay, you already have the rook here, so no worries there. Bishop to e7 attacks the rook, we have rook to f2, and now queen to e3. Now Magnus is the one putting pressure on the double d pawns, and he will start pushing attacking his passed h-pawn. So knight to b3, and also how do you defend the d4? You really can't. It's best to just let it hang, but Gukesh played knight to b3, and now Magnus starts collecting. B captures on a4, kicks away the knight. First rook e2, but it doesn't really do all that much. Queen to g1 check, knight to c1, and now he even picks up the d4 pawn. Now Magnus is up 3 pawns, and, well, there's a passed h-pawn on the board. Rook to h2, pawn to h4. We have knight to e2 attacking the queen, queen to b4. Just keeping an eye on both of the pawns here. Knight to c3, and now pawn to a3. Not much more to be done here. Queen to d1, so now the rook defends the pawn. It would be a terrible mistake to capture, because then rook captures, wins the black queen. So bishop to d6 attacks the rook, and now rook to c2. We have pawn to h3, king to a2, and pawn to h2. Absolutely crushing. B captures on a3, attacking the black queen, but now just queen captures on a3 check, king to b1, and king to a7. And he was in this position on move 43 that Gukesh resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. There is no defense against rook b7. Rook b7 just loses for white. If you try rook to b2, then you blunder the knight, so you can't really do that. And other than that, it's really hard to even think of a move. Like maybe a nice move would be knight b5 check. If black captures, then rook a2, knight b5 check, pawn captures, rook a2 wins the black queen. The problem is you can also capture with this pawn, and then once you take on c7, the bishop also guards the rook, so there is nothing there. So yeah, brilliant stuff by Magnus. You see what happens when Magnus tries to create chaos on the board. I mean, bishop to f8 is a blunder by Magnus. There's no argument there. But then after Gukesh spots the blunder, Magnus just plays knight to c4, spends a minute on the move, and he convinces Gukesh, that it's a brilliant move. And Gukesh does not go for bishop captures on c4. He spends half of his time playing queen g2, and then it's just all Magnus from this point on. That's basically the story of this game. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Next game I will cover is a very special one. I'm not going to tell you why I'm covering it or how I've come by such a game, but it is a Mikhail Tal game. You've never seen it before, or maybe you have, but just not on this channel, because I still have not shown it. You guys will have your world will be turned upside down once you see this game. But that's the next game I'm covering, so stay tuned for that. I would like to thank Michael Hildebrand, Fred Ackerman, chess legend, uncle at the bar, and friend at the library for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.